Sorry about that. Thanks very much, Oliver and Philip and everybody else, NFDI for Chem, for letting me have a few minutes here to chat. I'm going to go through this quite quickly because we are limited in time and we wanted to have some discussion at the end of this. So this is a presentation about the IUPAC Gold Book, which is basically based off of the slides that I used last year for the workshop. But I decided that I needed to kind of start with a background on the Gold Book, just simply because I assumed there were going to be some new people here who might not know much about it. So this is a set of slides put together by myself and my longtime collaborator, Leah McEwen. We are both heavily involved as volunteers in IUPAC. I'm the technical editor for the IUPAC Gold Book, but I'm also on this subcommittee about the Gold Book. And Leah is the chair of the Committee on Publications and Cheminformatics Data Standards within IUPAC, as well as being a member of the subcommittee on the Gold Book. First slide just shows you some things about the Gold Book in a very, very quick sense. I'm not going to dwell on this too much, but the idea is we have a website that has, at this moment, about 6,500 defined concepts in chemistry, each of which has its own DOI. And there is an API that we've built that we deployed back in 2019 to support machine accessibility to the resource. This is a digital implementation of a book that was originally published. And the source of the content for the book and the website is from what are called IUPAC recommendations. Recommendations come out of the divisions of IUPAC. They go through a formal process where they are submitted to the Interdivisional Committee on Terminology, Nomenclature, and Symbols, or ICTNS. They do a formal review of the document. It then does go out for public review, and then finally gets published in the IUPAC Journal of Pure and Applied Chemistry. So these are the definitive sources of the definitions that are in the Gold Book. And as of this time, there are about 185 recommendations over the last 40 years, actually 45 years, that have been published. As it says on the left, these are mainly about attributes, types, parameters, and dependencies of chemical properties. But the Gold Book and the content of, the Gold Book does not contain information like the naming rules of chemical compounds, calculations, or specific entities or instances. So for individual chemical substances are nominally not present in the Gold Book, although some did slip in during the first iterations as physical books. Right now, here's some statistics. I'll draw your attention to the fact that right now we're going through an update process. That update process is to basically ingest all of the definitions that have been created by the different divisions across all years, with the removal of duplicates or revisions of terms. And as you will see at the bottom here, that corresponds to, at the start, about 24.5, almost actually 25,000 with the removal of synonyms, different chemical concepts. But if you kind of deduplicate those, you get down to somewhere just over 17,000. And so we're looking in this update at significantly increasing the corpus of terms that are in the online Gold Book. And again, each individual term will get a DOI. And so they're obviously referenceable in a semantic sense. Just really quickly, here's some examples of more recent terms. And just to point out that currently terms that are being approved are now written nominally in accordance with a set of guidelines, which is good because that means they are slightly more aligned with ontological representation, maybe, let's say, than they used to be, where they were more free-form text. This is just one example page of what a particular concept looks like. So we obviously include the individual references of where this definition came from, and also, as I said, provide an API. So there's a relatively simplistic JSON-based API, a JSON and XML-based API that I created for this site, which I'm hoping to significantly improve after we've done the update of content, which is the main focus. And just quickly to point out that the current content on the Gold Book website is sort of the original content that was in the books that were published. So that content does need this very significant update because it is not current, as of more recent recommendations that have been published that have got revisions to particular concepts. To do the content update, I've built a system which I call the term review system. And this is just a vehicle by which I can ingest all of the content from these different recommendations, clean it up, and then make it available to divisional members to also go in and make comments and update as necessary if there are any issues within individual terms. An update on what I gave last year as an update on this process. We've been, as it says at the bottom, we're a volunteer organization. So this is something that we do, unfortunately, on our volunteer hours. So we are planning on deploying about 2,000 new terms by the end of this year, which are from the more recent recommendations that have been published. And those include the Glossary of Physical Organic Chemistry and one on analytical spectroscopy. The process that we're going through right now is nominally going to be finished in July of 2025, which is when IUPAC will have its next General Assembly. And so within that time frame, there is a time later next year where the content will be nominally in. The revisions or the individual divisions will have made their updates as necessary, but there will be some time built in the process to look at the following two topics, which is to deal with the fact that right now, when we put the information up into the Gold Book, we do link from within definitions to other terms, but currently those are only other terms within the same recommendation that is published from the current term. So as a consequence, when we get to the point where we have this corpus nominally all together in one system, we may decide how we're going to approach potentially linking across terms in different recommendations, which is not a trivial topic, as you can probably imagine. And then secondly, we do have a large number of terms that have multiple definitions, especially across multiple different IUPAC divisions. In particular, if I look at the statistics, half-life, for instance, is defined 15 times, and I think it's across 5 different divisions. And so the consequence of that is, how do we deal with that situation? Do we try and get the groups together to try and come up with one definition and then add a set of notes that can clarify the usage in a particular subdiscipline of chemistry? Or do we, in the end, have multiple definitions and then represent those on the same page, but then obviously give the different contexts of where they apply? So this is something that we're very interested in trying to work out. To this group, we want to say that, we're obviously trying to set this up in a way where we do want to enable semantic chemistry. And there's a lot of words on this slide. I'm going to really focus more on the bottom part of it because of the time, which is, the concepts that are developed, obviously, in a chemistry concept are relevant across many different broad and diverse communities. And obviously, they are at least nominally developed for humans without necessarily the thought about machines. And so, we need to kind of get more information about what are the needs for chemical concepts, what is missing, and are there classification schemes that we can think about in the context of future development of IUPAC recommended concept terms. And to that end, I can also say that there is I'm working on, I think I reported that I was going to do this last year. I am working on an aggregated kind of list of terms, of definitions that are available across all of these 185 different recommendations. And at some point within the next couple of months, that will be made available as an Excel spreadsheet so that the community can see what terms have been defined, where they've been defined, and what I'm hoping to have is actually links back to the individual recommendations and potentially to the individual actual terms within those recommendations, because more recent PDFs on the Degrader website, who publishes the Pure and Applied Chemistry journal, have what are called destinations within the PDFs, and so you can actually point to the individual terms in those PDFs. So, this is a very broad question, but we're going to hopefully put out some more information so that it will help the community, help us come up with, what is needed. So one of the things, as you've seen in the agenda, is that we've been working with NFDI for Chem, especially over this last summer, to deal with how will IUPAC definitions nominally get kind of like used or reused within the context of ontologies. And so there is now, as is linked in the agenda, a document, sort of guidelines on how to do this that we've been discussing. So it's basically, how would you approach using an IUPAC term as a reference source for putting into an ontology. And as you can see here, because we have the DOIs, that makes it easy to cite. There obviously may be a need to abstract concept, genus, and differentia if you're going to align things with particular higher level ontologies. But we do have some other questions, how transferable are these constructs, for instance, concept, genus, differentia, applicable to different use cases? What needs to be done in addition in a chemistry context? Do we need to do classification? I would think that would be something, but again, we're not so familiar with that activity, even though in a sense we do classify things because they come from different divisions of IUPAC and therefore different sub-disciplines of chemistry. And how do we handle dependencies? So these are just general, again, thoughts that we've had in terms of what we might be interested in hearing about. I've got some quick examples here. I submitted some of these examples to Philip, and he kindly responded with some comments on these. And some of these have, if not all of them, have been included in that guidelines document as examples. There are situations like this one where the definition is pretty much well aligned with going through the process of, dealing with the concept, the genus, and the differentia, but that's not necessarily always going to be the case, and probably it's not going to be the case in the majority of examples, I would imagine. In this second example, you can do it, but there is, as Philip pointed out, an issue with the word typically, which obviously provides some ambiguity here. And so, for instance, as an analytical chemist by training, I know that these kinds of materials are used for extracting what would be called interferences in certain situations, rather than extracting analytes, the chemical substances that are under study. And then I've included a third quick example here, which is one that I didn't give to Philip because it just shows how maybe ambiguous some things are going to be in terms of looking at this stuff. This is a definition of chemical species, the most recent definition of chemical species from the Glossary of Physical Organic Chemistry. And one of the things in here, it says the term is equally applied to a set of chemically identical atomic or molecular structural units in a solid array. And so there's maybe some different levels at which this could be represented. It might come across as more complicated how to translate this or reuse this in the context of creating ontology entries. That's my spiel. I think Philip might have some commentaries to add from the NFDI for Chem side, and then hopefully we'll have some time for discussions. Thanks.